Hello, welcome to Taboo Podcast, where our conversations revolve around inclusion, unity, and equality for one and all. My name is Mia Masak. I am proud, and it is my distinct privilege to be your host and guide as we venture down this important road to discovery, both inwardly as well as out. As part of the May We Prevail campaign, I'd like to kindly welcome you all to Talk Real Media's Real Talk on Suicide. This is a delicate conversation that I not only do not take lightly, but have desired to have for quite a while. When very first mentioning this topic throughout the pain communities specifically, I was mostly silenced and shut out. There was an attitude as though a discussion such as this would lead people to darkness, when in actuality, and throughout my vast experience, it has done quite the exact opposite. I have had people convey to me that even just the word itself, suicide, is negative and should not be mentioned. But the way I see it is that is a grave disservice, and it is the feeling as though there's nowhere to turn or convey these less than convenient truths that can ultimately push someone over the edge they are already standing on. To begin, I feel it is important to take a moment of silence for those who are no longer a part of this earthly realm as a result of their own choosing. I'd also like to silently acknowledge those who are still here, but perhaps have felt or do feel as though they don't necessarily want to be. And lastly, to each person impacted by a sudden loss, having those they care for who are barely hanging on, or even somebody who knows of someone, whether technically directly impacted or not, mental health or lack thereof is an all of us issue. So let's take a moment to recognize that as well. I invite all who are listening to take some whole body breaths. What we'll be covering in this segment could be considered heavy. And although it is important to me to discuss it all in a real, non-sugar-coated, well-rounded way, the intention is not to bring nor drag you down. It is not meant to be internalized as negative, but rather of utmost importance. Please consider opening your hearts and minds in ways perhaps you haven't before. Be receptive to the experiences so many have had, whether you are able to personally comprehend or relate. Use the subject matter that is available here to learn, grow in your compassion and empathy, and please consider offering a listening ear and non-judgmental state of mind as we move forward. It is important to note that I am not currently operating as a medical professional. The inability to come across a safe provider for this sort of conversation is in part what led me here, to take it all on my own shoulders for sake of possibility as to who this might be able to assist and help. I've witnessed attempts to pursue support within the traditional medical realm that only further worsened a person's psyche and damaged their will to live even more so. This is not to suggest not contacting your provider when and if you are experiencing difficulty, but rather is a demonstration suggesting all of our answers are not necessarily to be found in everyday clinics. We possess a sacred self-responsibility to fight for sake of our own quality of life, and also must look out for and be present alongside one another as we all navigate through the trenches that is this life. So let us start with story time. The first experience I ever encountered with a mental health crisis happened at a young age. I didn't understand my loved one's attempt on their life, and suddenly, almost losing them forever impacted me on a very deep level. As a result, and in an autopilot trauma response, I shunned this person as I worked to navigate my own pain. And I took their desire to check out of this existence extraordinarily personally. Years went by, and I came to recognize the extent this person had been distressed for most of their life, stemming all the way back to childhood and the fact they had very little, if any, support along the way. Those conditions are enough to drive anyone up the wall and diminish their will to press on, which I now understand better and can even relate in my own ways. Flash forward into the days of my beloved nursing career, where I am met with the true and very literal definition of agony on a daily basis. People's bodies seemingly betraying and turning against them. They no longer look nor feel like themselves, cannot adequately complete their daily cares or activities of living on their own, nor do the things they want or once loved to do, but yet they hang on desperately, mostly for the sake of others, such as loved ones. Witnessing this became a valuable point to ponder to me in regards to the sensitive topic of selfishness, right? Because to many, a person longing to leave this earth is considered self-centered. But what about the desire to keep someone who is suffering around for our own sake? Where is the line, and who is entitled to draw it? Flash forward a bit more to the point my own health stifled any and all goals that I had, whether career-oriented or otherwise. Out of sheer desperation, I found myself in a clinical-based support group, which of course has its place, and I'm thankful for the resource. These gatherings were facilitated by medical personnel who read out of textbooks and shared criteria via PowerPoint presentation. These were not individuals who could actually identify with our struggles, but yet conducted themselves as though they almost knew more about it all than we, the actual patients, did. During one session, I found myself in between two extreme ends of a spectrum. A middle-aged woman to my left was beside herself. She stated things such as, "I cannot and I do not want to continue doing this anymore. I have been in excruciating pain for decades, and now they're taking away my medicine. Nothing helps, fixes, or eases my agony, and I am done jumping through the insurance hoops or playing the referral permission slip game in effort to try new things or get the care that I need. I am in the process of moving away somewhere that will medically assist me in ending my life." Then directly to my right was a middle-aged gentleman, clearly extremely uncomfortable, and his response went something like this: "I cannot begin to relate to this conversation at all. You really shouldn't be talking like that. I cannot be party to or a part of this." And he proceeded to get himself up and exit the room. As I sat there, directly in the middle of all of this, I contemplated who was technically right or wrong, which is a faulty thought process in my opinion, because none of us here are the Almighty, if there is one. So when and why, how does it ever become our place to look down on one another or assume that our way is the end-all, be-all, righteous one? I am not cheerleading for individuals to stay or go, nor suggesting either side was correct or incorrect, but instead am simply stating that it's all valid due to the fact it exists. I sat there and held space for the person who felt safe enough in that moment to allow me to do so. Tears began flooding, and It was nothing short of a meaningful release, which is sometimes very literally all we need. The woman proceeded to thank me for listening and then conveyed how much better she felt just simply due to being heard. And meanwhile, the gentleman went to go tell the teachers, who later approached the woman in a hushed whisper, providing a hotline crisis number for her to call, which of course is yet another valuable resource, but could have been internalized as a bit dismissive or diminishing, as if a way to wash their own hands clean of any liability, and a low-key request for this person to go on ahead and handle all of this on their own time because others are too uncomfortable with it. Now, the gentleman wasn't wrong for essentially tattletelling, because in that moment, it is what he believed to be right. The only way he felt he could potentially help, and all that he might have thought was within his power to do so. But an interesting thing I have repeatedly found is sometimes it doesn't seem to be about the actual person who is enduring these things, but rather our motivations are rooted in proceeding however will make the situation more digestible or comfortable for us as bystanders. So once again, I found myself asking, what is the true definition of selfishness in these cases, and who gets the final say as to making that decision? I have unfortunately lost track of the amount of precious souls throughout my life that have exited by their own hand, whether entirely deliberately or perhaps in slow motion with things such as substance abuse. Other than it never getting any easier to lose someone, and the debilitating helplessness that it leaves us with, wondering if we did something wrong or could we have done more, longing for a final hug or last conversation, being left to put broken pieces that no longer fit back together, or attempting to make sense of it all, desiring answers to questions we will never get. Aside from all of that, I have found the most difficult part to be the realization of this fact. A person's life is theirs to do with what they so choose. That truth has proven one of the hardest to accept. Even though, when it's all said and done, what viable choice do we really have other than to work toward acknowledgement of that and ultimately honor the person we care for and the life they led, which includes but is not limited to their decisions. I'd like to take this opportunity to convey to those who are listening that what is out of our control could never be your fault. When someone makes that final or really any other sacred decision for themselves, there's not much of anything that can be done. That might leave us feeling guilty, shameful, or quite powerless. But we still are able to focus on our response and the way things are being internalized within. There is no time limit on grief, nor the infinite amount of ways it can impact or creep up on us. There is no right or wrong way to handle it. The goal could be perhaps to avoid any further destruction, but your journey need not look the same as anyone else's. Nobody is living your life or theoretically existing in your shoes. So there is no need to compare, belittle, or get down on yourself in regards to whatever your process looks like. It is undoubtedly to be a lifelong thing, full of ups and downs. Embrace it all as it comes and provide yourself the same loving kindness that you would for another who you care about. For context, and those who might not yet be aware, I myself have lived with incurable and untreatable chronic health conditions for over 2 decades. So I know a little something about pain, and I've had my fair share of hardships. But when I confide that these last couple years or so have been the most difficult of my life, it is my truth, and I wholeheartedly mean it. During those months, I was kicked out onto the street after my longtime home, basically overnight, was gentrified, meaning that rent essentially doubled, and this left me houseless. I can recall literally bringing my life to the curb as the new owner and his friends popped celebratory champagne on what was once my front porch. I then lost a child, followed by a brutal physical attack by the very same community members I devoted my life to defending and fighting for. And to add insult to literal injuries, was offered absolutely zero support throughout any or all of those tragic events. As a direct result of my personal space being invaded, I contracted COVID-19. And due to weakened immunity, as well as limited desire to keep going, I almost did not persevere through that battle. Upon eventual entry into the hospital, it was declared when I arrived that I was indeed half dead. There's plenty more where all that came from, but I trust you all catch the drift. A lifetime was lived in a matter of those weeks. And when it was all said and done, I was left completely and utterly alone to navigate it all and to somehow get myself through. Now, this segment is not about me or my personal battles. I share this information because throughout all of what I've just described, it was the closest I had ever been to not surviving by my own choice. I felt pushed down too far and too low, as if there were no possible way for me to ever get up again. And after enduring all of that, plus what my life had already previously consisted of up to that point, I wasn't even sure if I wanted to go on, push through, or move forward. Obviously, throughout so many years of upset, suicidal ideation or death wishes were definitely something that existed. Thoughts such as, I would do anything for the hurt to stop. Is my only escape or pain-free possibility really to just be dead? At least if I were no longer here, I wouldn't be in pain anymore. It's important to recognize these frames of mind are extremely human. And it's okay to acknowledge that being alive and navigating this living experience is hard. A quote that I like is that there's nothing more courageous than deciding to face each day as it comes. Nothing braver than waking up to the same demons we went to bed with. What if we were to begin reflecting upon all of this as symptoms to tenderly treat, as opposed to problems in need of fixing? No one is scolded for having a fever or a tummy ache. Those things come and go, and we graciously provide whatever care is needed in order to get through and recover from it. So why isn't the same approach applied for when we are addressing our breaking point? The desire to throw in the towel, as they say, can also come and go. So imagine if we existed in a world that held those edges for us, when it all just felt too heavy to bear on our own. If each of us operated as a safe space for ourselves and others, whether or not we agreed or understood, imagine that peace were our approach and love was the practice. Not based on any stipulations, expectations, and without limitations and conditions. I believe it could not only save countless lives, but perhaps the very world as we know it. I wanted to share my most recent struggles with you all for a couple reasons. One, my aim is never to come off as a lecturer, a preacher, or as if I somehow know it all or have it figured out. In sharing my own vulnerability, I hope it ensures that I am an imperfect being as well. And to draw an illustration that although what we go through might differ, the specifics, we can still all at some point and in some way or another relate to each other, solely on the level of being a human on this planet. And two, I want it understood that I came the closest I have ever been to ending my own life. Even more so than ideation, I began navigating actual plans. I reflected on ensuring to schedule events on my calendar to leave loved ones with good memories before I left. I contemplated arrangements to get rid of belongings as to not leave a mess behind. I began researching all the possible ways to end things. ideally with the least amount of pain possible, even began fantasizing about things such as staring into oncoming traffic, etc. There became this sort of envy for those who had already left, and almost a sense of relief that I would perhaps soon be joining them. For the record, I don't want anyone worrying. My life is dedicated to assisting others in hanging on by all means necessary. So ultimately, I decided it would be somewhat hypocritical for me personally to check out. When the torment lessens and the logical mind is able to process more clearly, I am reminded as to what a true gift it is to be alive, and consider it a blessing that I am still here and able to continue trying for sake of those who are gone. There's part of me who feels as though I almost owe it to them in a way, as well as to myself, right? After all I've gone and made it through, as well as the fact that there are others out there who have it much worse. And not that it is ever a competition by any means, and nor is that a statement meant to lessen our difficulties. But that is just a fact that we'd all do well to remember and take time to reflect upon on occasion. One of the only certainties in life is inevitable death. Thus, I've made the decision it's somewhat of a waste of my precious time, that's severely limited here, to continually wish it away, because one day I will no longer have that luxury. Why devote my energy to releasing my power to all that has hindered me, when I can choose to use it as strength to rise higher, be stronger, wiser, and use my experiences to be of service to others and help them find their own light? This doesn't make it any easier. But if we can survive everything that has attempted to diminish us up to now, it is my personal belief there's nothing we can't do. For me, it had to become about more than attempting to eliminate whatever might have been testing me, but instead finding ways to coexist with it. Nothing has to diminish me or my abilities. It's a matter of creatively striving for balance and remaining in what I refer to as an intensive care unit for my soul. One night, not all that long ago, I was curled up in a ball, so distraught there weren't even tears anymore. And I began thinking about a goodbye letter. What would it say? Who would it be to? Should I write a general one or a separate note for each person I love? Well, I smirked in that moment because that would be a lot of letters. I began reflecting upon what it would say, how I would want others to know that this wasn't their fault, that there's nothing they could have done, how I would hope my life to be respected, including the ending of it, and the fact my dying wish would be for everyone else to live their lives fully. How I didn't mean to transfer my hurt from me to you, but that my death would not have been personal. My immediate reaction was to seize this thought process and completely shut it down, right? Oh, no, no, that's too real. That's too dangerous. Don't even take it there. But given I had never been knocked down so low, I decided to embrace the state of mind I was in and open myself up to the potential for a heightened state of creativity. I ended up bleeding out on paper in form of written word. My farewell swiftly turned into an open poem that extends just as much love to survivors as it does for those who are gone. There's no doubt in my mind that these thoughts being expressed saved my life in that moment. And to close this time together, I'm honored to share it with you all for the very first time publicly as a thank you for being a part of this and joining me here. It is entitled Sometimes. I live a life that no one else understands. Due to what's outside my control, nothing has gone according to plan. I feel a lack in strength to push through, despite being told that I can. I want to give up sometimes. The trauma, despair, not to mention emotional, mental, physical pain, 'tis all more than enough to drive anybody insane. Suffering can often be invisible to the naked eye. We may appear to be living, but inside, we have died. Desperate, silent cries out for help often seem they are in vain. A little blood, yet mostly grief, loss, and sadness are what run through our veins. Each of us struggle at one point or another. Maybe not you, if you're lucky, but perhaps a friend, parent, sister, or brother. Just because they never confided in or told you doesn't make it untrue. Haven't you ever wanted to give up sometimes? I reflect on the precious souls who we've lost and the holes they left behind. It's difficult to follow through on ending it with the weight of all that on my mind. When you checked out of your hurt, you left it for us to find. I'm still here to honor your legacy as it now intertwines with mine. Nevertheless, I still romanticize about giving up sometimes. We don't hold it against you. The attempts, whether they were successful or not. No one can judge what's carried within, although it is clearly a lot. Hiding behind a mask and smiles that are fake become a load to carry that is far too great. Even the most resilient are only human, and over time grow weary. The thoughts inside one's mind can be heavy and eerie. Darkness creeps in and hinders any opportunity of being cheery. It is no wonder to me that you long to give up sometimes. While our heart is still beating, emotions are fleeting. Each moment a temporary passing. Making a permanent decision based upon a temporary conclusion is forever lasting. Our worth isn't dependent upon the days we can get up or can't. We haven't forgotten or stopped loving those who are gone, and we shan't. Remember the times you were convinced weren't survivable, but that you surpassed? Making the impossible possible, it is clear you are built to last. This doesn't change the fact this life is yours to take or keep. The power is up to us to choose belief in the curiosity that tomorrow could be better. We won't know if we're not here, and anything could happen. So hold your loved ones near. Life is an oceanic flow. The boat is ours to steer. May we decide to live with hope and faith and find balance with the fear. For what it's worth, I am grateful you exist and am happy you are here. If you've been looking for a reason to hang on, consider this your sign. And to all those who we miss so much, my prayer is to see you again sometime.